I see quite a few officers engage me in friendly conversation. Whether it's heartfelt, doesn't matter. If you speak to me with respect, I will engage you the same way. So whether you mean it in your heart is neither here nor there. If you speak to me with respect, I will do the same. If you speak to me disrespectfully, I will do the same. Which brings me to another situation that happened a few weeks ago. Two young ladies were having an issue with their vehicle. They had a flat tire. As I was passing by, I saw they were changing the tire, so I was on a one-way street, so I had to go all the way around before I could come back and offer them some assistance. As I got back to them, I asked them if I could be any assistance to them. They seemed to think that their tire was the cause of poor maintenance of the road. So I said, well, if you feel they felt it was some asphalt from the road that actually got stuck in the tire. I say, well, if you feel that's the issue, I say, then you can call 911 and get a police officer here to fill out a report, and the city's going to be responsible for that. She said, yeah, about 3-4 cops have passed by already. I was like, man, it used to be a day when, cops would ride by and see, a citizen in duress. Or distress, or see a citizen having problems, and they will stop and offer some type of help. But that seems to be gone. Like I've been catching a few officers, going beyond the call of duty. So as I picked up my phone to call 911, an officer approached from the opposite intersection, and we flagged them down. I happened to have my PLR slung over my shoulder. Since I was just coming from the gym, I didn't have the ability to holster a weapon on my hip since I had my gym clothes on. So normally I sling my PLR 223 or 5.56. So as the officer stopped to render help, he turned his blue lights on, and he came out and pulled his light out, and we start looking at the tire, and it come to find out it wasn't concrete, it was actually metal in the woman's tire. And he said, well, I'm gonna tell you right now that the city's not gonna pay for that, and I agree, it was metal, not asphalt from the road. So it was no real need for him to do a report. So then he turns his attention to me. He said, sir, can you put that down, meaning my weapon? And I said, no, sir, I cannot, because I'm legally carrying a weapon. So you asked, and I declined. Then he says, officer safety. I said, well, you're safe. Well, since you don't really have a job here now, you can leave, since you're not writing a report. He said, no. I said, well, I noticed that we're still kind of close to the young ladies that were having issues. So I said, well, first of all, let's step away from these ladies, because these ladies don't have anything to do with what we got going on right now. So I step closer to my car, and he follows me. He says, do you have an ID? And I say, yes, I do. Are you saying I committed some type of crime? He said, no, I didn't say that. I said, then why are you asking for my ID? And that's the bullying stuff that I'm talking about right now. Because I refuse to comply with his request, now he's asking for my ID. And that's the stuff that I'm talking about. Because as far as he knows, from looking at me, I'm carrying my weapon within the confines of the law. But since I didn't follow his request, now he's asking for my ID, which is a no-go. So I guess before he decides to ask me for my ID, he calls for backup. So now, before backup gets there, because I don't know he's called for backup yet, I asked, you don't know who I am? He said, no, I don't know who you are. I say, well, if you don't, you'll soon know who I am. So that's when the two other officers show up. I forget if they turned their lights on or not. And just like I figured, the two other officers show up. As soon as the first officer approached me, he said, O'Shea? I said, yes, that's me. He said, yeah, I watch your YouTube videos. I said, hey, awesome. And then the rankingest officer gets there, and I've actually filmed one of his stops before also. And I explained to him that this officer, since I didn't comply with his request, he starts to get more aggressive, asking for my ID. And then I simply said, I was very cordial to the other two officers, and then I kept yelling at the officer that I felt was getting more aggressive to get the fuck away from me. And I would be very calm and casual to the other officers that were very respectful. And then I would look at the culprit, as I like to call him, and say, get the fuck away from me. Get the fuck away from me. They was like, well, Mr. Jackson, there's no need for that. I said, it is need for that because I hate bullies. I didn't do what he asked me to do, and I had the right not to do what he asked me to do. Then he wanted to escalate the situation. So they thought it was more wise to make him to go ahead and step away from me. And the other two officers engaged me. And they said, well, the language. And then, I'm saying, I'm a grown-ass man. I speak in the manner in which I feel. I was very cordial to you guys, like I was very cordial to him, until he tried to escalate the situation because I wouldn't comply with what he asked me to do. So the bottom line is, if you try to bully me, you're going to get the fuck away from me. That's just the bottom line to it. You try to bully me, I'll bully you. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.
These probably need a bit of a police report, a piece of road that the light here came off and stuck in your car.
My whole time.
So they can take this to the city so they can that right here.
That's cause of it. That's cause of it. It came from the streets already. It's supposed to clean it up though, right?
Is there a hole?
I haven't been down there. I saw her in the park there.
You see that camera right there? Yeah. It's straight up road. Okay. So get out of my face. Am I being
I never said you were. All I
All right,
asked
now
you
get
were
out of my face. Have a good day. All right, could have been that much. I'm being a what?
I said you was being. I didn't say anything.
Okay. Yes, I know one. Also, another name, Officer Landlord. Hey, how you doing? Nothing, man. I just stopped to help the lady. And I'm the one that actually did call, well, I was calling the police before he actually rolled and he got flagged. You got one change? No, I didn't say one of you change this time. No, my weapons, the one I carry on my side, is only one of the things. Right now, that's the thing. But it is actually illegal to carry. That I don't have to have a person when I'm doing this, just because you actually know what. And don't follow me with that damn dumbass bullshit. I know the law. I know the law.
I started asking to get your information. So I asked.
Information for what?
Because he asked me to. For a
Okay,
field interview.
I don't have to give you anything
Okay,
if I
then
don't
go
want
on.
to.
Go on.
And what's your name and badge number?
B.Wilson. 304.
304.
My sergeant's right there. You want to talk to him?
I don't want to talk to your sergeant. I'm talking to you. Don't try to bully me, man. I know the goddamn law.
I'm not bullying you.
And I'm pretty sure you know who I am.
I have no idea who you are.
Okay, well, ask the people. Tell me to put my weapon down. If I don't want
It's
to
for
put it
officer
down,
safety. We do it for everybody.
you can request it. If I didn't, if
I
say
said,
no,
sir, can
then
you
I-
please put your weapon down?
No.
Okay. Did I ask you
Anything
again?
else?
Did I ask you
No,
again?
I'm done talking
No.
to you now.
Okay,
Get
then
the
go
fuck
on.
out of my face.
I'm not in your face.
Anger, border. Look.
Go ahead. Look.
Okay, I know it. Get the fuck out of my face.
Now look.
Let's
Look. Now you're crossing the line.
I ain't crossing no line.
Yes, because
I'm
you're
not.
disorderly.
Get away from me.
Sir, look at me.
The only people that can say disorderly is the civilian. You guys can't say disorderly conduct. Look. Get out of my
You
face.
can. All right.
Can I tell you
You
to
can't
say,
get
sir?
your
You
calm
can.
down a little
You
bit.
can. I hate bullies. I hate bullies with a passion. Now walk away from me.
I'm not trying to touch you. I wasn't trying to put my hands.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Here's the deal. It's
I hate bullies.
perfectly legal for you to carry that weapon.
Yes.
I don't have to. I can't ask you for your information.
You got
all
it.
that good stuff. I know you do. I don't need to see your. We've talked before.
Yes.
On Victory Drive
Yes.
once.
Chill.
Tag light. I backed up the officer
Yes.
over a tag light. We don't have to do anything. I would appreciate it if we didn't hurt so in front of me. That's my
I
request.
hate bullies, and I will cuss if I want to. I hate bullies.
Now, there's not any children present.
Hey, you're such and such. Hey, such and such. We can be as cordial as we
I
come.
would like to say,
I hate bullies.
if there were children present,
I
that
don't
would
care.
be
I
would
don't
be a
care.
crime.
Okay, unless they Have a good one. I'm glad you guys were safe.
Let's just, we're just gonna separate here. We're gonna go on our way. There's been help. We got no other issue here.
Okay.
We're gonna move on.
All right. I hate bullies now. I will always act this way when somebody comes to town.
That's what it is. You know you're gonna act that way.
Don't have fun.
Don't let him stir it up in the business.
I'm not getting in trouble. I'm obeying the law.
Well,
You can get out
I
of
can
hand
say
real
in
quick.
court about it.
well, I just said you were obeying the law, so we're on agreement.
Okay.
I got more strikes than he's got, so that's what we're gonna roll with, okay?
Okay.